All right. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Lori Aker, and I am the Director of Marketing for Earth Fare, and we are super excited for today's Fresh Forum. Regenerative agriculture, it works in partnership with nature to make great tasting nutrient food while healing the planet. Now, by combining agroecology and agrotechnology, regenerative agriculture approaches land management and collaboration with nature. Now, today we're sitting down with Force of Nature, a company who is on a mission to improve the quality of our environment and our health while answering the call for food raised in a way that aligns with our community's values. Now, today we'll be speaking with Force of Nature's Robert Sansom, and we'll be taking a deeper dive into regenerative agriculture, how Force of Nature partners with their farmers, and how the Force of Nature team is reclaiming the legacy of meat. Now, we do have a very large audience today, but we will have a live Q&A at the end of the presentation. So there's a Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. Make sure to direct all your questions there, and we'll get to as many as possible at the end. Now, Robbie Sanson is the co-founder and CEO of Force of Nature, a regeneratively sourced meat company based in Austin, Texas. Now, Robbie's roots, they run deep in the natural food community. Previously a CFO and COO at Epic, Robbie spent much of the last decade studying regenerative agriculture at ranches all over the world. Now, through this education, Force of Nature was co-founded with the intention to accelerate the creation of a global regenerative supply network. Now, Force of Nature works in partnership with land stewards, ranchers, and farmers who are all committed to creating a positive return on the planet. With Force of Nature, consumers now have the ability to invest in environmental regeneration by consuming meat that is good for the planet. Now, born and raised in Austin, Texas, Robbie received both a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from the University of Texas. And when he's not building businesses aimed at saving the planet, Robbie can be found on a trail, ocean, mountain, or field, always making time to appreciate nature and explore his surroundings. Robbie is also a land steward at Rome, which is a ranch where he owns regeneratively managed bison. So, Robbie, thank you so much for being here today. Again, we're so excited to have you.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Fan of what you all do, and I think this is really cool to get to connect with consumers. That's so important to what we stand for at Force of Nature, and what we really want to do. Obviously, we want to succeed as a brand, but really we want to create an awareness to important issues in agriculture and food, and reach these consumers and help them understand, the truth and the stories of where their food comes from. So thanks for this opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Education is just a huge part of who Earth Fare is. It's really the heart and soul of our company. So this is great that we are able to partner. I want to start off a little bit. Folks that may not be familiar with Force of Nature, tell us a little bit about why you started the company and the story behind it.
Yeah, well, that was quite the intro you gave me. So I'll try not to restate anything you just so eloquently laid out there. But you mentioned our background at Epic Provisions, and even prior to that, that company was actually originally a vegan energy bar company. And when my co-founders Katie and Taylor, were faced with serious and challenging health issues, they realized that reincorporating healthy animal-based protein in their diet was key and necessary to their own recovery and journey. And then they realized they weren't alone, and there's so many others that went down the path of a diet program that was so popularized, and yet had health struggles with it. And then that kind of put them in this awkward situation, because they had been convinced by the narrative at the time that you couldn't support animal agriculture and be thoughtful about sustainability or the environmental impact, or that you couldn't support animal agriculture and simultaneously see welfare standards for animals improved, or the circumstances for rural communities, or the health of consumers. And that started us on our journey, where we realized those actually were not truths; those were myths, and that the way nature always did it had it right. Meaning, there is a balance of plants and animals in harmony and functioning and thriving ecosystems, and we've been mining that fertility that those healthy systems instilled into our land bases and extracting from that fertility and degrading our land bases, and that the solution is to take those lessons and that wisdom from nature and reincorporate healthy animals playing their keystone roles and providing the critical ecosystem services they evolved in environments to play, and simultaneously doing similar approach to plant agriculture, thereby addressing these challenges that conventional agriculture has caused. So effectively, that's a long-winded way of saying, with Epic, we figured out that you could have a values-based company that's improving food, improving health of lands, and improving the health of communities and consumers, while also supporting animal agriculture. We took that torch and we've transitioned it from ounces to pounds with Force of Nature, and we're really trying to build and scale those systems. And when I say those systems, I mean the systems that actually honor the manifestation of what consumers expect, which is healthy food coming from healthy systems, doing the right thing that you can feel good about and proud to be a part of. And I think that juxtaposes in serious contrast to the industrialized system that I think many consumers are complicit in supporting, but do so completely unknowingly because they've been shielded from the truth and there hasn't been transparency. And so Force of Nature is here to work with consumers to create awareness and to create access to a better offer, a better protein option, and then to connect those consumers then through that supply network to the producers that are practicing the things that they hold aligned values for and want to celebrate, and who need that support, because farmers are struggling just as much, if not more, than many of the rest of us to keep their land and their identity and to do what they know to be the right thing for their community in a system that makes it difficult for them to do so.
Absolutely. Now, with Force of Nature, you're more than just beef. You specialize, I would say, in more exotic offerings. Can you tell us a little bit about the products that are currently at our Earth Fare locations and what folks might be able to find?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to what I said. It's about awareness and access. So we're going to tell stories, and we're going to do this with you, and put really meaningful information on the package and whatever else we can do in the store. And then you can engage with us on social media and on our website, and we'll tell more stories. And again, try to connect you to important issues in food. But the food, has to be awesome, and it has to be what you're looking for. And so I think just offering beef or just offering poultry really limits your ability to reach the consumer. And so we, for all intents and purposes, we offer everything, meaning we have beef, as you noted, and we have bison and elk and venison. We even have wild boar, and we do have, other traditional proteins like pork and poultry. And then we have all of those in ground package formats. We have them in burger formats. We have them in the steak formats. We have them in breakfast sausages, and we have them in sausage links. All of the types of proteins and the types of products that a consumer would regularly use. We want it to be convenient. We want it to be accessible. We want to limit and lower the barrier for you to get what you want, how you want it, where you want it, make it easy for you to work with. And so, we're trying to connect you to these issues and then also make it easy for you to support that system by having a whole bunch of stuff that you like, and working with really great retailers like Earth Fare who make it available and make it easy for you to incorporate it into your routine.
Absolutely. And I must say, you have a phenomenal website with some really great recipes. So if you haven't checked out their website, it's forceofnature.com. The recipes are just absolutely amazing. And we've tried some here at the house and they are delicious. Here at Earth Fare, we care about humanely raised animals, meat that's never, ever been treated with antibiotics or added growth hormones. Can you talk to us a little bit about animal welfare and how the animals are treated, how they're raised, or what the typical day for maybe a bison on one of the ranches out there would look like?
Yeah, obviously, the fact that we do so many things means it varies. The day of a chicken is going to be different than the day of a bison. But man, I mean, I feel like I should say that we're not perfect because I'm about to tell you a really beautiful story, and I don't want it to come across as everything we do is flawless, because it's not. I think we're in the meat industry as a whole has a long way to go to be where I think it should be, and to realize its potential and the opportunity to better serve all of those constituencies and
Mhm.
stakeholders that we talked about. Um, but man, I'm really proud of the progress we've made so far. I was actually on a very large bison ranch recently, and I spent the whole day there, so I can tell you what the day of those bison looked like. And this was a 115,000 acre ranch. And at the end of that day, those bison had been roaming a particular valley on that ranch. And at the end of the day, we went and spent time with them, and we sat in the middle of a herd of bison that was twice the size of the herd of bison that live in Yellowstone National Park. And we just sat there and we listened to them graze, which is a really cool sound as they huff and puff and breathe and crunch on grass. And then, in the distance, we saw black bears and brown bears, so real predators, and in a real magnificent mountainous landscape there, but the bison interacting with these wild places. And there wasn't a fence in sight, there wasn't a building or anything. I mean,
Mhm.
outside of the vehicle that we were all standing on, and of course all of our iPhones, because we just were stunned by the magnitude of the moment. This was just nature being nature in its truest sense. Now, that's a very large ranch and a very pristine environment because it's spent 30 years in recovery. I think other ranches have to do more work. If you look at standard, beef operation, for example, beef aren't native to, they're not native anywhere really, but they're certainly not native to the United States. And so, but they have the potential to be managed like those bison. And in a reality and in a world where we have fences up, we have dammed waterways, those predators don't really exist to
Mhm.
play the role that they are supposed to play in moving herds of animals across these Great Plains. Ranchers and farmers can step in, and they can strategically and intentionally rotate their animals around their land base so they can replicate or emulate the proper ratio of impact to rest and the proper amount of stimulation relative to what the condition that land base is in, and simultaneously balance it with the need of the animals, and so on and so forth. And so that's what you're really trying to do. You're trying to emulate nature in an imperfect world that we've disrupted permanently and forever. We can
Mhm.
never go back. We have to tear down all the fences and all the dams and reintroduce a lot of species that don't exist anymore if we really wanted to rewind the clock. And given that's not an option, there's a way to manage through human ingenuity and intention, to allow those natural cycles, those important roles to be played, that potential to be delivered upon, and food at scale to come from it, without all of the negative externalities we see from the most industrialized system that's 99% of agriculture today.
Absolutely. No, it's great that you guys are actually going out there and being hands-on. Our Earth Fair team, we love to visit farms and facilities. It's experiencing the whole journey. Oftentimes we don't think about the journey, that food goes through to get on your plate. We just sit down and we eat, but just having that background and that story and that knowledge is just extremely important. So how do you select the farmers that you partner with?
We have a variety of ways.
Mhm.
Like I'm going to the Grass Fed Exchange next week. It's a huge
Mhm.
conference across the country that gathers farmers who believe in 100% grass fed practices and honoring, everything that stands for and represents, and the potential there. And we've been doing this for a decade now, so we have a lot of pre-existing relationships domestically and abroad.
Mhm.
We also work with the Savory Institute, who is a not-for-profit that goes around trying to provide training and support for farmers and ranchers who are interested in getting into regenerative or need help, or already in it and need help with some challenge that they're facing. The same thing with Understanding Ag and their Regenified program, and the same thing with Rodale Institute and their Regenerative Organic program. And so we work with organizations like that to
Mhm.
find potential new partners, and then we always go visit. I think we live in the unfortunate world, and in this industry specifically, where it's easy to put on blinders and pass pieces of paper around that tell you what you want to hear. But we really believe in going on site, on land, and seeing it in practice, and really more than anything, meeting the farmer or the rancher or the responsible person and understanding their why. Are they trying to scheme and make it get an angle, or is this fundamentally important to them? Are they really passionate and in it for the right reasons? And then we actually have our own master verifier on staff, and to do our own, we call it a land steward index, and our own protocols and our own audits and verifications. So there's a lot that goes into it, whether it's the practices or the standards or the people and objective third parties or us internally. It's a lot of work. We got a team of people doing it, but that's what we're here for.
Absolutely. And I love the saying, what's your why? That's very important. And I'm happy to hear that's top priority for you guys as well when you meet with these farmers and potential farmers and ranchers. Regenerative agriculture in labeling, right? Is there a certification? Everyone's just so worried about labels and looking for organic and regenerative agriculture. How can they tell if a product is part of regenerative agriculture?
Yeah, it's I don't want to say it's in its infancy. I mean, it was in its infancy when we've got into it a decade ago, but now it's starting to emerge and get attention and garner real awareness from a broader, more mainstream group. But there hasn't been time for some third party verifier to kind of get to the point where they have general awareness of what they do and appreciation really for what they do. The scale behind it to supply, the speed to respond and grow as more people come. And so there's I think Savory Land to Market, Rodale Regenerative Organic, Understanding Ag Regenified are three third-party verifiers we really respect and work with. They have different standards. There's pluses and minuses to all of them. Much like us, they're not perfect, but they're a heck of a lot better than what's out there. So if you see one of those, that's really good. But the absence of that does not mean something is bad, right? And so, and really, the presence of any verification doesn't necessarily give it a free pass either. There's unfortunately, we live in a world where many verifications, the barrier to entry is a checkbook, and despite a pretty symbol or a nice sounding name, there may not be a lot of substance behind it. And so I think it's important that those tools are available, because many of them, I don't mean to disparage all of them, many of them are very good and genuine, but many aren't. And so I think it's always important for customers to know, to look past that, to look at the label, read the back, to listen to the story. If it says 100% grass-fed and regenerative, that's a heck of a great start, and a really strong indicator that they're the tip of the, in the pole position and the best possible claim set and base. I think that the biggest thing I'd recommend though is not to look at the color of the package or how pretty the imagery is or whether it says natural or what claims it has, but to go one layer deeper. And if they're really proud of what they're doing, they won't stop talking about it and they won't stop showing you. So on their website or on social media, they'll be like, look at this amazing stuff that we're doing. Look how incredible this is. That's walking the walk. If all they have is a pretty package, some nice marketing copy on their website and a couple of claims, well, they're not proud enough of what they're doing to show you. That's a red flag. In this day and age and the way information flows and how important it is to connect and tell stories and be transparent. If you can't be transparent, I'd go as far as to say that's a sign you have something to hide. So, I would encourage consumers to look for regenerative, look for 100% grass-fed and the ruminant proteins and their poultry and pork, look for pasture raised, look for regenerative wording. But really more than anything, go look at where it's coming from and tell me if you feel like that's something that you get excited about, if they're excited about it, if there's pride and values represented, you're on the right track. If it's all of a sudden you find that it's a dead end and you don't know where this is coming from and it's homogenized and truly commodified and there's just some marketing copy and no human or no story, no animals to being respected behind the scenes, then you probably want to steer a different direction.
That's perfect. Well, Robbie, we do have some questions in the Q&A box. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to the Earth Fare moderator, and we'll start to tackle these questions if that sounds good to you.
Yeah, sounds great.
Perfect.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. The first question we have today from one of our listeners is asked for any resources or support programs that farmers can turn to if they're looking to get into regenerative farming. Are there any, and the verification programs that you mentioned, what would be the first steps for a farmer that would like to learn more about incorporating those practices in their own farm?
Yeah, I would go to those, and there's more than those three. Those three have the probably the most recognizable verifications, but there's numerous other programs that don't necessarily provide a verification, but they do provide training and support and community and guidance for farmers or ranchers interested in getting into that space. I think it varies whether you're doing crop production or animal agriculture or both, ideally both. Um, but again, I would say step one would be to go to the web pages of those three organizations I mentioned. Again, Savory Land to Market, Rodale Regenerative Organic, and Understanding Ag's Regenified programs. Those are all third-party verifications, and they have very thorough front end farmer rancher support training, how to do it, how to get how to gain access to a market, do's and don'ts, and many of them based off of regionality, meaning it's a heck of a lot different what you might do in the Northwest than what you might do in the arid South. And so they're right sized for some of that nuance, and I would say start there.
Awesome. Thank you. We've had another question come in. What can we as consumers be doing to advance the message of force of nature and regenerative ag? I mean, obviously we can vote with our dollar, we can buy, but what are some other things that we can do to advance that message?
I would say the mission and the message is that of regenerative ag, and force of nature is grateful to be a part of, and hopefully a thought leader and carrier of that torch and message. But really, it's about regenerative agriculture. I think attending this webinar is a good start, right? Paying attention to what's going on, because I think within animal agriculture in particular, if you look at what's happened with food in our country, there's been a revolution around claims, but really around values, around consumers saying, hey, it's great that it's cheap and convenient and it's in this box, but I need a little more. I think we went too far down the path of cheap and convenient, and I need to take a step back, and I'd like to see a little more value. I'd like to see that you stand for something, for my health. I'd like to see that you stand for the benefit of some other community of people or animals, or I'd like to see that you aren't causing harm to land and ecosystems. And I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but that food revolution has driven accountability up the chain to food producers, and then it's begun to permeate into the perimeter of the store. And you've seen yogurt, you've seen dairy, and you've seen even eggs most recently, which are commodity sections, start to have to raise the bar and start talking about values within the food system, and that be a variable that's just as important as cheapness, which was the prior gold standard there. So I think being aware that this is happening and keeping an ear to the ground and paying attention, and then thinking critically about what you hear, because so much is just repeated as a fact, when in reality it's not. And so I think thinking critically, paying attention, I'd honestly encourage you to follow a lot of folks that are doing and talking about regenerative ag. Even if you don't buy from Force of Nature, I'd encourage you to check out our blogs and follow us on Instagram at Force of Nature Meats. We're trying to tell those stories more, and as much as we're trying to sell meat, we're trying to connect you to your food system. And so I hope we can be a conduit and an entry point into that. But I think once you do that, I think you're going to figure out how much power you have and how much opportunity there is. And then tell your friends, tell your neighbor, be your own thought leader and your own as an early adopter, expose other people to these realities and introduce them to the opportunity the reality that there's a system that's likely aligns more with their values. And I'd say just keep being curious.
We've had a couple more here on this that are sort of aligned, so I'll kind of combine a couple. We had one listener ask, do we work to educate politicians on the importance of this? And another question that was similar was, how much does the USDA and other governing agencies dictate, limit, or otherwise operate in the process and product?
Well, I'm going to take the USDA question first. Maybe we'll come back to the policy one, because I think those are maybe a little bit more separate. On the USDA, I think the general consumer understands the FDA a little more than they understand the USDA. The FDA is less stringent. It has more things that it's responsible for, but it's a little bit more intention and paperwork. The USDA, and it's not to say there's not substance there. It's just less rigid than the USDA, which there's not if you look on a package, there's always going to that you find at Earth Fare, for example, there'll always be a USDA establishment number on the package. It'll tell you where it was processed, and it will verify that there was a federal government employee who works for the USDA on site during the slaughter and during the further processing of that. So there are a lot of food safety regulations. There's a lot of oversight. There is a lot of involvement in animal agriculture, including dairy, through the USDA. So I guess the answer to that question is what's their level of involvement in any supply chain related to meat? It's a whole lot. The other question on the politician, could you elaborate on that?
The question was just and I think she's talking about you and your organization, or is there maybe a lobbying organization that works to educate politicians at all levels? Is there a lobbying component of this?
Yeah, sorry. So I would say, Kiss the Ground is a not-for-profit organization doing a ton of incredible work. From a lobbying perspective, from an education and awareness perspective. Josh Tickle, an author, wrote a book called Kiss the Ground, borrowing their name, and then there's a sequel that became a documentary which is available on Netflix and everybody should watch, called Kiss the Ground. The sequel is coming out this month. It's called Common Ground. I'd encourage y'all to watch both of those documentaries, but they're doing a lot of lobbying. I know Mark Hyman has an organization called Food Fix. He's lobbying in Washington, largely around the Farm Bill. We could spend way more time than we have talking about the shortcomings of the Farm Bill. This is an incredible piece of legislation that came about, kind of during the Dust Bowl, which, was intended to say, like, hey, things are getting tough for farmers. We want to be able to produce food. Let's make sure that there's some aid for them should things go bad, that they continue to have an incentive and have the opportunity to make food for us all next year. It's been a little bit captured. And now the sad reality from that bill is that taxpayer dollars go to subsidize a food system that produces a lot of corn and a lot of soy and then sells it to large food manufacturers at less than the cost of production. So we see food on our shelves that contain a lot of corn, contain a lot of soy, animals maybe in a conventional system that get fed a lot of corn and fed a lot of soy, again, because those are so cheap, because taxpayers are offsetting those costs. And then we see those foods represented on the shelf for, probably a cost that is lower than the true price to produce it. So I don't want to get too far into that one. But yeah, there's a lot of folks working to make sure that Farm Bill and other pieces of legislation are actually supporting farmers, actually supporting the will and desires and need of us as consumers and citizens, and that we're taking a different look at our food production systems from a stability and security perspective, and not just perpetuating the status quo, because some very large, complex industries, big food, big chemical, big petroleum, big ag, have the most lobbying dollars invested in Washington to perpetuate the status quo.
Awesome. Thank you, Robbie. We do still have questions rolling in, but I know we are about at time. So I will kick it back to Lori for a final wrap up.
Yeah, no, those were all great questions. Today was very informative. Robbie, thank you so much for joining us. And Force of Nature, we carry over 20 different varieties in all of our locations, 23 different products to be exact, from ground bison and elk and venison to a full line of bison steaks. And they're all on sale now at Earth Fair. Yeah, just come check out Force of Nature. And Robbie, I know that we are getting some newer items into the meat department coming soon. Do you want to touch base on that for a moment before we go?
I think I mean, we have such a great relationship with you all over at Earth Fair. There's always new things coming. I don't want to get ahead of myself because I think we still have some work to do there, but I know we have a really extensive set available at Earth Fair with over a dozen items, and I know there's more on the horizon, some really exciting stuff that you are working on with us to help us from a whole animal perspective do more good and drive more positive impact on the land, and then also do that in a way that serves consumers, maybe some bison in some forms and formats they're not currently getting. So fingers crossed we get that over the finish line here, and we continue to expand our offerings with you all.
Absolutely. We are excited to build the Force of Nature set at all of our Earth Fair locations. And again, Robbie, thank you so much for joining us today. We will make sure that this video gets put on Earth Fair's YouTube channel at My Earth Fair. So make sure to subscribe. We'll also send a link out via email tomorrow so everybody can watch if they weren't able to join today. But again, Robbie, thank you so much. Very informative.
Thanks again for the opportunity.
Absolutely. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and we will see you at the next Fresh Forum. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.